In the last video, I taught you some things about rafa and nasab and jar. Very briefly, rafa is used for the doer, and ism, that's the doer. Nasab is for the detail about the act, not the one who did the act, that would be rafa. The details about the act, where did it happen, when did it happen, how did it happen, who did it happen to, etc., etc. That would be nasab. And then anything that comes after the word of, like book of Allah, or the religion of Islam, anything that occurs after of would be jar. One of the other things I told you last time was that you can tell rafa or nasab or jar in Arabic by observing the endings of a word. So if the word ends with u or un, then that's rafa. If it ends with a or an, that's nasab. And if it's e or in, that's jar. So today I want to start with, a sample word, Muslim. And if I write the word muslimun, then that would be considered rafa because of the ending un. That means if I have a sentence like a Muslim traveled, then the act of traveling, because it was being done by the Muslim, the Arabic version of that you would find the word muslimun in it. If I were to say the word musliman, and I'll tell you a little bit about that alif later that's put here in writing, but before we get to that, if I said, for example, I met a Muslim, who's doing the act? I am. Since I'm doing the act, I'm rafa. But who did I meet? Give me some details. That would be a Muslim. Because the Muslim is a detail, you probably would find musliman in that. Now, a little bit about this alif. It's just a writing formality. It's not really something that affects the meaning of a word. It's a standard way of spelling words in Arabic when you put an on them. So that alif, you'll find that in many places in Quran. It's there. Don't panic about it. Don't worry about it. It doesn't change the meaning of a word or impact its grammar or anything like that. Okay? So then I'd like you to know about muslimin. A reminder that if a phrase occurs after of, any word that occurs after of is going to get the in ending. So kitabu, the book of a Muslim, the religion of a Muslim, the beliefs of a Muslim. Then if we were to say that in Arabic, you would probably find muslimin in cases like that. So the top one is rafa, the one underneath that is nasab, and the one underneath that is jar. But I want to take it a step further today. I want to take you to another word, and the word across that you see is muslimani. And I'm going to write two more words here. And as I do it, you'll notice that the word Muslim is still there. This part is Muslim, fine, but I added ani to it. And then I added aini and aini to the other two. These additions, they're important because in Arabic, any word you take, like kitab means a book, or let's take an easier word that all of you might be familiar with, masjid, right? If I take masjid, the rafa' version would be masjidun, the nasab version would be masjidan, and the jar version would be masjidin. You just change the endings un, an, and in. But if you add ani to it and you pronounce it masjidani, if you say it like that, that actually means two masjids. You double the meaning. So double the quantity. Okay. So if kitab means a book, kitabani means two books. If Muslim is a Muslim, muslimani is two Muslims. The same thing happens when you add aini. So if you say muslimaini, it actually also means two Muslims. So either you can add ani to make it two, or you can add aini to make it two. But the difference between them is important. If you say muslimani, it's actually two rafa. Rafa means they did it. In other words, instead of telling me how many, the word ani isn't just telling me how many there are, it's also telling me the status rafa. So now we're coming to a confusion that really needs to be addressed. Originally, I told you look at the ending sound, un or an or in, and you can tell if it's rafa or nasab or jar. But now, you can't tell that by the ending sound because the ending sound here is e. And by that standard, this should be jar. This isn't an ending sound. I like to call this an ending combination. It's a combination of letters. It's not just one sound or one haraka, one mark. It's actually a couple of letters together. Ani, it's a package of letters. I like to call that a combination. What I'm trying to get at then is Arabic words either have ending sounds or they have ending combinations. These three words that I've written here, muslimani, muslimaini, muslimaini, these are ending combinations. And these are the pair combinations. Either any one of these means pair, meaning whatever the word is two of them. Quran will say, for example, jannatani. Jannah, is heaven. Jannatani would mean two heavens. Okay. Khasm means an argumentative person. Quran will use khasmani. Khasmani meaning two argumentative people. Okay. But the difference between them, unlike the sounds, is that when you see ani, it's two rafa. But if you see aini, it could be two nasab or it could be to jar. In other words, you don't think of it as R, N, and J. You think of it as 2R, 2N, and 2J. And before I go any further, remember, as a rule of Arabic, you don't have enough vocabulary right now. You don't know most words of the Arabic language, and that's cool. If I ask you about a word and I tell you, can you tell me if it's rafa, nasab, or jar? Could you figure that out for me? Your first step is going to be, does it have a combination? Because if it does, then I don't care about the ending sound. I'll repeat myself. That's critical. When I ask you about any word you don't know, the first question you have to ask yourself is, does it have a combination? If it has a combination, go with the combination. If you're sure it doesn't have a combination, then you can look at the ending sound and say, okay, because of the u or the a or the e or the un or the an or the in, I can tell that it's rafa or nasab and jar. So our first go-to is not the ending sound. Our first go-to is the ending combination. And as I told you, ani, aini, and aini are all three of them are used for pairs. Somebody might ask a logical question. Well, Ustad, how am I supposed to know which times is it nasab, to nasab, and which times is it to jar? They look identical. In a few sessions, you'll know the difference. For now, you'll only learn by context. If you just saw it in the dictionary or you saw one word sitting by itself, you can't tell. But once you learn to kind of analyze sentences and look at the larger text and things like that, something you will learn as time goes on, because right now we're just focused on a word itself. Right now you could say, I don't know. It could be nasab and it could be jar, and that's a good answer. I would be upset at a student, well, not that upset, but I'd be disappointed if you said it's nasab. It's to nasab. That's not good enough. It could be to nasab and it could be to jar. But if you see ani at the end, that's definitely to rafa. Meaning, for example, just to put this in perspective, if I said 2 Muslims studied Arabic, who did the act of studying? The 2 Muslims did. And that's why I would use the first word muslimani, because there's 2 things I wanted to communicate. There's 2 of them and they did it. When they do something, then they have to be rafa. So the right choice would be muslimani. But if I were to say, I met 2 Muslims, then I'm the doer, I'm rafa, but they're a detail. So the right word to use would be laqitu muslimaini. I met 2 Muslims, the right word would be muslimaini. Finally, if I said, this is a house of 2 Muslims, or this is a car of 2 Muslims, when I point at it or point at the house and say, of 2 Muslims, then the right choice once again would be muslimaini. Yes, in sound you can tell the difference between this and this, but these are both, we have to distinguish between them because one is used for nasab, the other for jar, even if they sound the same. In your mind, there has to be some distinction, okay? Finally, for today, you can say muslimuna, and I'll write a few words together first, and then I'll explain them to you. Muslimina, and I'll repeat that word, muslimina. Okay, if you look at this, the word Muslim is again still there, but I added una, and this time I added ina, and again I added ina. Be careful about that. A lot of students confuse these 2 guys, the ones I've highlighted right now. They confuse them with each other. In other words, muslimaini and muslimina, when you look at them the way they're spelled, then they look kind of all too similar because there's a ya and there's a noon. So they figure it's the same thing. No, it's not about the letters. It's about how you pronounce them. The pair is aini, and the plural is ina, like Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, or Kafirina, or Mushrikina. Quran, sometimes you're reading, you don't know enough Arabic to know all the meanings, but you'll hear words like mushrikun and mushrikeen. Sometimes you're listening to Islamic lectures and somebody says, yeah, and the Muslimun went over here, and the Muslimin went over there. And you're like, sometimes they add un, sometimes they add in. What they mean is una or ina. Which is which? What's the difference between them? This is basically, in the Arabic language, this una or this ina is the equivalent of an S at the end of a word, like books, cars. But it's more than that, because when you say muslimuna, you're definitely talking about more than 2 Muslims. When you see una at the end, you're talking about more than 2. If you see ina at the end, you're talking about more than 2. If you see ina at the end again, you're talking about more than 2. In all 3 of these cases, we're talking about plural, but unlike English, where plural means more than 1, in Arabic, plural means more than 2. Okay? Now, a couple of quick things. The word Muslim, these endings, una, ina. Again, you don't have enough vocabulary. You can't figure this out for the whole Quran. I'll tell you one shortcut. If you see una or ina at the end of a word, it's a combination, then you should know that it's talking about people. It's not used for stuff. It's not used for objects. It's not used for places. It's not used for ideas. You don't find una or ina for anything other than people. Okay. By extension, it can include human beings, or in addition to human beings, it can include jinn and angels. Okay, una and ina can be for human beings and jinns and angels. In your reading of the Quran, those words can have una or ina in them. If you're reading a word that has una at the end, for sure it's not talking about a thing. It's talking about people or angels or jinn. Most of the time, people. Okay. Now, what's the difference between these three? Muslimuna and muslimina, muslimina. You could probably tell the pattern now. The first row is all rafa. The second row is all nasb. The third row is all jar. So I'm going to put here 3R. And what I mean by 3R simply is that it's more than 2. And then I'll put 3N and 3J. Okay? That's all it is. And again, this muslimina is identical to this muslimina, and you might complain, how am I supposed to tell the difference between the two? Instead of complaining, you should be thanking Allah, less for you to know. You got two things being done by one sound, so it's actually lesser work. The only thing that has 3 versions is the singular version, muslimun, musliman, and muslimin. The pair version, the 2 version is ani, aini, aini, meaning muslimani, muslimaini, muslimaini, and the plural is muslimuna, muslimina, muslimina. Now, there's the part that you have to do, and I cannot help you do it in video, except I presume you're going to do what I'm going to do. I want you to recite this to yourself while you're looking at it 5 times. Even if you sound like a zombie, I don't care. Just do it with me. Muslimun, musliman, muslimin. Muslimani, muslimaini, muslimaini. Muslimuna, muslimina, muslimina. That's 1 time. Muslimun, musliman, muslimin. Muslimani, muslimaini, muslimaini. Muslimuna, muslimina, muslimina. That's twice. Muslimun, musliman, muslimin. Muslimani, muslimaini, muslimaini. Muslimuna, muslimina, muslimina. Muslimun, musliman, muslimin. Muslimani, muslimaini, muslimaini. Muslimuna, muslimina, muslimina. Last time. Muslimun, musliman, muslimin. Muslimani, muslimaini, muslimaini. Muslimuna, muslimina, muslimina. This is critical. In order for me to teach you, you've got to memorize some things. I'm not going to have you memorize thousands of things or hundreds of things or even dozens of things. It's not going to be that much memorization at all. But the few things I need you to memorize are absolutely critical. They're the backbone to the Arabic language. This is one of those things you just have to memorize. You've got to visualize this image, this chart. In other words, Muslimun, Musliman, Muslimin is 1 rafa, nasab, and jar. Muslimani, muslimaini, muslimaini is 2 rafa, nasab, and jar. Muslimuna, muslimina, muslimina is plural rafa, nasab, and jar, which means more than 2. Why is that going to be important? You're going to be reading Quran one day, and then Allah Azza wa Jalla will say, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. And you'll hear al-muttaqina. You hear an ina at the end. Remember your training? The first thing you ask yourself, does this word have a combination? Don't go by the sound, always go by combination first. You hear an ina at the end. As soon as you hear that ina at the end, you ask yourself, okay, ina, it's got to be a combination. But which combination? Your mind is going to take you to the plural column. Una, ina, ina. Which means that muttaqina in that ayah could be nasab, could be jar. I don't know the difference yet. It's one of those two though. Eventually you'll know which one for sure. But for now, at least you narrowed it down. That's how well I want you to narrow it down as time comes. But that will not happen if this stuff does not reside in your head. If it's sitting in notes, if it's sitting in a PDF file, it's sitting in a recording, it's not in your brain. This stuff needs to be in your brain. It needs to roll off your tongue. Before you go to anything further, you need to be able to recite this comfortably and visualize this in your mind quickly and easily. And as a matter of fact, you should be so good at it. If somebody says, give me 2 jar, you'd say muslimaini. Or give me 1 nasab, you'd say musliman. Or give me plural rafa. You think a little bit about it and say, okay, plural, 3rd column, rafa would be the first word, muslimuna. That's how good you should get at it before you move to anything else, okay? This is our scheme for rafa, nasab, and jar for 1, for 2, and for plural. All the best to you.